would take. They both went to elite schools, Morehouse College in the South, and they both were products of the black middle class. But where they differed, I think, was Dr. King grew up in the segregated South, born right at 1929, just as America was going into the Great Depression. And Dr. King saw a different and a brutal side of white segregationist power. And it was something that I don't think Adam Clayton Powell saw. That shaped Dr. King in a way that that Adam Clayton Powell didn't.
And led to his assassination.
Yes, and led to his assassination. Absolutely. In a sense, both of them were assassinated. Dr. King, literally. Good. Adam Clayton Powell was politically destroyed because of his brashness. So what I find with now, both of them come at a time when African Americans have migrated, and I think this is also important to make the making of these two figures. African Americans began to migrate immediately after the Civil War. Every 10 years, you look at the census, you see more and more African Americans migrating toward the west and toward the north. Except for the 10 years during the Depression, when you don't see much migration, but you see. And so African Americans migrated from rural communities in the South to cities in the South like Montgomery and Atlanta. That created the possibility for a Montgomery bus boycott, but also created the possibility for an Abyssinian Baptist church, which was Adam Clayton Powell's political base, and which became for Martin Luther King the base for the Montgomery bus boycott and Ebenezer. And so as these two figures began to interpret the biblical text, they thought of the Exodus story for Adam Clayton Powell. The Exodus story guaranteed for African Americans in his sermon, "Stop Blaming Everyone Else," which he preached at Abyssinian Baptist Church in the 50s. It was a sermon that invited African Americans to fully participate in what it meant to be a citizen, take responsibility for what it meant to be a citizen.
He really pushed African Americans.
He pushed African Americans to take responsibility for it. And so for Martin Luther King Jr., however, there was a different way of understanding the biblical text. Martin Luther King Jr., growing up in the South, personal piety became very important. In as much as his political work, personal piety became a mask, if you will, for Martin Luther King Jr. He knew that if he was leading African Americans out into the streets to demand full inclusion, he knew how to use the television cameras, how to use the public square, and the way he used it was to lead African Americans into acts of personal piety. That's what I call the pillar of cloud. He masked, in many ways, his real intentions. He would lead them to pray in the streets, to sing songs. And when the television cameras came and they saw African Americans living out some of the, these kind of virtuous virtuous expressions, right? Singing church songs, praying, holding hands, praying for their enemies. Not only was the South was embarrassed, the nation was embarrassed, but they were not only embarrassed domestically, they were embarrassed internationally. And so I call that the pillar of cloud, because just as a cloud kind of blends in seamlessly, Martin Luther King's tactics blended in with the American moral landscape. These were virtues for America.
And this was also Dr. Martin Luther King behind the veil.
Yes.
And you know more about that because of one of your professors, I'm sure.
Dr. Baldwin.
Dr. Baldwin, who talked about that and et cetera. And I think that you're an excellent reflection in terms of what he said about that and some of the things that you're saying about that. And I want you to know that the information that you're giving us now is very, very precious. And I think that understanding these two individuals and some of the things that they faced and how different they were, one from the north and one from the south, but yet and still they had the same commitment, and while they went about it differently, they had the same commitment in terms of the uplift of African Americans to eventually reach the promised land.
Right.
And I think that that's what we're still trying to move toward.
And that's what we're still trying. That's what I hope that as you read my book, but as we think about biblical interpretation today, we face police shootings of Black and brown, African American and Hispanic